Welcome back to the TitleTown Rundown here on Boston Sports Zone. Joy Matroni alongside Kyler Quelch as we get episode 15 underway with all of the latest news in the world of Boston sports. But before we get into today's topics, a quick word from our BSZ-wide sponsor, Quick Assist. Selling tickets, list them once and sell them everywhere with Quick Assist. Your tickets are posted across 12 plus resale platforms at once, giving them more exposure and giving you a better chance to sell faster. Use quickassist.app.link/BSZ. That's assist spelled ASYST. .app.link/BSZ. Every ticket sold through our link helps directly support Boston Sports Zone and the work that we do across the network. All right, Kyler, as we've done with so many of these episodes, let's get started with the Boston Red Sox. They bounced back from an unexpected series loss against the Pittsburgh Pirates with a series win over the Arizona Diamondbacks, where they took the first two games before losing a battle of a game in the finale of that one in extra innings against the Diamondbacks. What I noticed initially in that series is that we did kind of get some of what was a success for the Red Sox in their great stretch of games when they were 32-8 over their last 40. And is that it was a step up, next man up mentality, I should say, throughout that series. Especially, I wanted to point out Mickey Gasper, who came up to replace the injured Masataka Yoshida, and he slid into that DH role very nicely. They were selective in what situations he was going to be playing in these games because he's a much more polished hitter from the left-hand side compared to the right-hand side as a switch hitter, and he got that opportunity to hit left-handed in this Arizona series, and he really took advantage of it, homering in 3 straight games for his first 3 homers as a member of the Boston Red Sox, the third of which tied the game on the series finale. Unfortunately, that was the one that got away from the Red Sox in extra innings, which boiled down to some control issues for Giovanni Moran, which were frustrating to see, obviously, but it's something that every relief pitcher is going to go through at certain points in the year. And now they have a chance to win back-to-back series for the first time since they won 9 straight series before losing 3 straight against the San Francisco Giants, which brings a lot of storylines along with it, with the return of Rafael Devers to Fenway Park for the first time since the trade. But I know you had a couple thoughts on the Arizona series before we move on to San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I thought they played a little bit better. It's like they heard me a little bit talk about the fundamental baseball that you and I talk about constantly, where just put the ball in play. I thought Durbin did well. I thought Contreras did well. Rutschman played well, and Mickey Gasper, the ghost, came out of nowhere and had a couple home runs right in that series. So I thought those guys looked really good, and it was next man up mentality, like you said, and they even came back in the game that they lost. I thought that in that third game, what really mattered, other than totally had a bad start, but you're going to have a bad start. You're going to have a bad relief appearance. I don't take anything away from what Toley was able to do the last 2 starts and what Moran has done the last year or so with the club. But I think when you don't have Whitlock and you don't have Slayton, those are the 2 guys you'd put in that situation, and you'd probably get out of it if they're healthy. So 9 times out of 10, not saying the one time that it doesn't happen, but 9 times out of 10, you get out of that, you get to the bottom half of that inning, you probably win. And they only lost by 1. And walking in that last run is what lost them the game. other than they should have scored 2 runs, or they should have not even let it get to extras in the first place. You can argue that when they needed that one more run, they didn't get it. But in that situation where you'd be able to hold them, you don't have Garrett Whitlock or Slayton. So I feel like we shouldn't take too much from that loss. You did win a series, which you hadn't been doing the last couple of series, but you stepped up a little bit. You're not going to be ungodly all the time, but if you play the way you and I expect, which is, hey, try to win 2 out of 3, you're doing your job. You're getting that wild card spot.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think they're in a position now where, despite um, how much they did struggle in those 3 consecutive series losses, they remained with a 5.5 to 6.5 game cushion, depending on the day, um, in that AL wild card. And what that tells you is exactly what you just said. If they continue to win series, they're gonna put themselves in a position to be playing baseball in October, which is exactly what all of us Red Sox fans want. And um, I wanted to add on to something you said about the Arizona series and talking about both Peyton Tolley and Giovanni Moran. I don't think Peyton Tolley really necessarily had a bad start. Obviously, it wasn't great, and he was able to kind of bear down and get to that 5 inning mark. But he was able to sort of stick with Brendan Pfaadt, who was his opponent in that series finale, and the Red Sox offense was able to score on Pfaadt, who had, I believe, a 30 2/3 scoreless inning streak going into that game. So they were able to kind of break through, and then Mickey Gasper had the big swing with the 3-run homer to tie the game at 5 at that time. And then I think you mentioned another huge thing in regards to how the end of that game unfolded in not having Garrett Whitlock and Justin Slayton really changes the way that your bullpen operates. Without them, obviously, you had um, Eric Miller and Chapman pitch earlier in the game as well. Chapman, of course, had the ninth, which meant that you had to go somewhere else in the 10th. And then I believe in that order, Miller pitched the 7th, and then Guerrero had the 8th. And it was nice to see Guerrero continue to bounce back after some of his struggles from the last week or two. And I think that if his velocity can stay up, he has been great. And I mean, your only real other option within the bullpen that day was Alec Gamboa, who opened in a game earlier in the series, and I think that it would have been it would have been interesting to see what Gamboa was able to do, considering he uh, had limited rest, but he only used 9 pitches in his opener appearance in earlier in the series, and it all comes down to just Moran didn't have it that day, and that's gonna happen for a lot of relievers. So you kind of just have to flush it and move on, and hopefully the bullpen can build it back up in this series coming up against the Giants. And it's going to be a very interesting pitching matchup tonight. As we're recording this on Friday, you'll see the episode on Saturday, so you'll know the outcome of the Friday night game. But we've got Sonny Gray and Logan Webb on the Giants side on the mound for both sides tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited. 2 guys who've been great pitchers through the years. I know Webb's probably not having the best year that he's had in his career, but he's a great pitcher though. You know what? He's their true ace. You look at Sonny Gray. He's been great this year. It's a true pitching matchup. I enjoy one of these every once in a while, Joey. And I'm also interested to see how Devers gets screened in Boston. I don't think it's going to be very Hello, how are you? I think it's gonna be there's gonna be some booing going on and some ill sentiments, if you will. But I'm interested to see how the Red Sox offense looks or approaches the game against Logan Webb. Do they shorten up on their swings or do they try to hit it out of the ballpark? If they shorten up on their swings, which when they go against better pitchers or they go against better opponents, they tend to do better because they know that it's tougher. So they tend to shorten up on their swings. They tend to, not swing at a pitch in the dirt. Rafaela, keep those hands back, please. And yeah, it's like I look at I look at their approach more than I do the statistics, Joey, because you could tell me that money is everything, but I'm going to use this example. You could tell me that money is everything, but if you don't have the connections to get you to where you want to go, you know, it, at that point, it's the same thing with statistics. I know what the results are for the generalization, but what is this team looking like? Are they being patient? Are they getting on base? Um, or are they chasing out of the zone? Because when they're chasing out of the zone or they're trying to hit it 600 feet out of the ballpark, you end up missing on a pitch that you should hit. So, like, I'm honestly wanting them to play a little bit of small ball or continue doing that until you feel the confidence to naturally do it. You know what I mean? They kind of got out of that for a little bit. They got back into it. I'm interested to see if that carries over.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to a lot of the times, approach wise for the Red Sox is what their strikeout numbers look like. Um, I believe they struck out 8 times in the loss um, against Arizona at the end of that series, but also in that series, they had the opposite end of the spectrum where they had their first game without a strikeout for an entire game since 2010. So those are just like that tells you exactly it there. If they're able to put them all in play and advance runners, get them in, even if they're having to bunt more often than they ever have this season. And I think that that's been evident since Chad Tracy took over as the interim manager. I'm sure we'll be having discussions towards the end of this season on whether or not that interim tag should be removed. There's a section of people that probably say it already should be removed, but just in general, their approach has absolutely changed since Chad Tracy took over, and I think to have the most success, they need to continue to embrace that because they reverted back to some of their old ways when they lost 3 consecutive series.
Yeah, and I think that's just desperation. You got to settle in and mentally kind of lock in there and trust the process, if you will. Uh, I'm sounding a little bit like Breslow, but you got to trust the process a little bit. And I actually wanted to ask you, Joey, what's your? Oh, uh-oh. Uh Oh, I'm still with you. I thought I exited out of the whole thing. I did not. I just couldn't see you. Technical difficulties for 5 seconds. Um, so I have a touch screen and it reverted back to my home screen. So we had a minute of panic. But I wanted to ask you, what is your expectation for this series and what is your expectation for like the rest of the year?
Um, well, one of the one of this is outside of baseball for a second. One of the biggest storylines of the series is the return of Rafael Devers, and we were talking about it before the show, and now we'll dive into it on the show as well. There are 2 different ways that you can look at it, and it's really going to depend on the person on what how they see it. Rafael Devers is a former World Series champion with the Boston Red Sox um, franchise. So those times and the years where you're making the World Series and winning the World Series are sacred times and are forever remembered in the world of Boston sports. Not only just when the Red Sox, but just any any team that we've covered on this show. If you win a championship, you are immortalized in the eyes of Bostonian fans. So it is very interesting to see the way that the situation ended with Rafael Devers. Obviously, the goal would have been for him to move over to first base and then DH when he wasn't in the field. One of his first quotes in that spring training, where this was the main discussion, um, was very simply put, I play third base. So from the get go, he really didn't like the idea of moving positions, and he thought he was a third baseman, and he knew that he was a cornerstone of this franchise. And that doesn't mean he couldn't have been a cornerstone of the franchise if he moved to that first base slash DH role. And I think that what he neglected to realize is that if he was able to do that, they could have kept Alex Bregman, because obviously this whole discussion stemmed from the signing of Alex Bregman a year ago, and you look at it now, and he's now a member of the Chicago Cubs. Um, so we got one season worth of Alex Bregman for $40 million, which then led to a contract opt out and him moving on to Chicago. But we thought we had a core of the team in Devers and Bregman, and now neither of them are in the way that it could have been handled on both sides. I'm sure there's some uh, looking back in 2020 is hindsight vision at that point and how some of it was handled.
Yeah, I do blame ownership a little bit because the way they were handling things before the middle of this year when things got really bad was hypocritical. I'll use that word, hypocritical. Um, there was no communication between players and staffers, and I think that's probably where Devers got upset a little bit. However, since he's been traded or since a little bit before it, he has had this sense of entitlement. And it's not even just with the Red Sox, even with everything that the Giants want him to do. It's been like, no, and I don't know. He seems like a different guy. And I wonder if, some of his friction with previous ownership was part of that, or his previous club, I should say. But, you know, I don't know. He just doesn't seem like the type of guy who wants to do whatever it'll take, like a Durbin. And that's why I think Durbin has really been embraced here versus a Devers, for example, even though Devers won a World Series. And I'm not going to doubt that he won a World Series because he has talent. He actually was hitting bombs off of Aroldis Chapman in his Yankee days, if we really want to go there. But, I think it's so interesting how it ended. I think ownership is to blame a little bit, but I also think Rafael uh, wasn't the most selfish guy, or the most selfless, I should say. He was a little bit more selfish, not selfless. Here, you get the point now. But I think he was more, I don't know. It just seems like there were tensions between the two sides, and I think John Henry, when he traded Mookie Betts, that set the precedent where there was no communication. It was like he kind of tuned out for a while, and then tensions kind of rose with Rafael Devers, and a lot of things happened there. And I don't think Devers handled it well, but I also think ownership wasn't communicating with the rest of the organization, and then we've had so much communication until the middle of the year, and then they're like, all right, we can finally go for it again. And that miscommunication led to losing guys like Schwarber, Bregman, Devers, Betts, superstars. I'm gonna call them superstars. And I
Yeah,
know, and
yeah,
I
no,
know, and I know
I
Devers isn't what he was in Boston, but still, guys who can hit it out of the ballpark, guys who, in the clutch moments, which is what you miss sometimes, um, can get it done. Although what I did see from Rutschman in this past series, he's ready to go. I'm excited about that acquisition now. And I told people don't panic about his first 17 at bats or whatever. Um, but I certainly think that this series will be interesting in terms of Devers. I think if you win 2 out of 3, it's good. If you sweep, great. But you have to win this series. This is the Giants. They've been the worst all year. Devers hasn't met expectations. I'm wondering to see how Devers plays. Does he come out looking to hit home runs? So yeah, I'm kind of interested in that, Joey. What do you have to kind of give me going off of that?
Yeah, let's. I wanted to pull up a couple of quotes that I found from Chris Cotillo of Mass Live during Rafael Devers' pregame media availability today. Obviously, he's going to be asked a ton of questions leading up to this game because of the way that his tenure with the Boston Red Sox ended. And I will start it out with Rafael Devers said, quote, "No." When asked if he had any regrets about how things ended in Boston, he said he's unsure about what the reception will be tonight. And I think um, I'll first say about that, um, I think it's exactly what you said earlier. I think there is a sense of entitlement within that and belief in himself that he was right throughout the entirety of um, the fiasco that went along with the Boston Red Sox. He did make the move over to first base for the Giants. That hasn't necessarily gone exactly how they would have hoped. His bat is the reason why he is an everyday player. He's got 25 home runs with a 244 average and 69 RBIs this year. And when he's not playing first base because he's not performing defensively at a consistent level this year with his fielding percentage slightly below average, he is relied on for his bat, and it's just been an overall down year for the Giants. He does have the 25 home runs, which is obviously what you can expect from Rafael Devers, but the goal for him is to get to that 30 home run and 100 RBI mark. The 30 home runs, I'm sure he'll get there. The There's still a little bit more to go with the 100 RBI mark as well, but I think the reason that there's so much discussion about this is because the bat was never the question. It was just a matter of he started out at third base, which is what there's a ton of movement around the infield, no matter who you are as a player. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is another big example of that. He started out as a third baseman. He's made the move over to first base, and despite the fact that he may have not hit a home run this year at Rogers Center, Vlad Jr. can definitely hold it down at first base, and I think that is kind of what everyone was hoping with the transition to first base for Rafael Devers would happen, is that the defense and the picking it would translate nicely over, because he showed flashes of being a very strong third baseman at times, but also some of the throws never really seemed. The throwing at third base never seemed to be exactly perfect all the time, which nobody is. He was never on the level of someone like Nolan Arenado, and I think that um the bat needs to stay in that 30 plus homer range and the 100 RBIs to have the ability to deal with some of the ups and downs that come with learning first base.
Yeah, I agree with you. I gotta be honest. He reminds me of this guy that the Red Sox signed from the Giants. Pablo Sandoval with a little bit more athleticism. Uh, big hype. Um, different situation. Obviously, Pablo was the panda. He was a bit hefty, but you know the but I just think for Devers, he's kind of like Brian Bayo too. He's like a mix of Pablo Sandoval in the sense that he hasn't worked out the way that the team thought he would, and then he's a mix of like Brian Bayo too because I think the defensive struggles are more so mental or cognitive or whatever you want to call it. Like, I think like you put him in a situation where he's comfortable and he's great. So I don't know, I don't know what you do to work with him, and also the entitlement thing I think takes over a little bit. Not to be rude, but I just think that like when you think you're all that, you don't think you have to improve, right? You don't think you have to put in the work at it, and I just think he may need a little bit more time and maturity to maybe figure that out. I don't know. Maybe it's a maturity thing. It could be a multitude of different things, but just the sense of entitlement to me seems to be like a mental hurdle for him. And I don't know. I mean, it's just like it's sad because you see what he can do with the bat. That is undeniable. I'm also sad how it ended. I really am, and I'm sad that John Henry kind of walked away from everything and didn't fix it right away. And and I am upset that like, hey, they couldn't they couldn't add a no trade clause for Bregman who wanted to stay here. Like I actually do think Bregman could still be valuable even if he was just DHing. Like and you had
Yeah.
Durbin at third, just to have the extra bat. You can never have too many pitchers. You can never have too many bats, in my opinion. I just want that guy who in the postseason is going to give you a good at bat, like a Schwarber or a Bregman. They're just professionals. It's like Contreras. Reason why I like Contreras, his at bats. He's just a professional. So,
Yeah.
but I just don't think Devers was doing a lot of that professionalism stuff. He wasn't working with people. He was saying, "This is who I am. I'm not going to change." And I think that gets in the way of his progress sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they were looking to build a championship team for years down the line that involved Rafael Devers. He was always going to be a part of the success. He came up and immediately had success as a platoon bat in 2018, when the last time the Red Sox won the World Series. And then in 2021, there was no guarantee that the Red Sox were even going to make the postseason until on the final day of the regular season, Rafael Devers hit a go-ahead home run against the Washington Nationals. That gave the Red Sox the win in that game. They made it into the postseason. They got through the wild card. They got through the ALDS, um, beating the Tampa Bay Rays, and then unfortunately couldn't make it past the Houston Astros in the ALCS. But we got further in that postseason than anybody ever thought we could, and that again brings Kyle Schwarber back into the conversation
Yeah,
too. But
again,
Rafael Devers was a major part of that as well, along with Kike Hernandez, who's neither
I
neither a
wish they
part of this
traded for
team
him just to play him in October.
anymore. That's
Seriously,
very.
I love his October. Hot take of the day. I love his October play. I don't care about August or the rest of the months. I just love how he plays in October.
Yeah, so it'll for sure be interesting to see how it goes. With Rafael Devers because it is truly two very different ends of the spectrum with how people view Rafi. He was a World Series champion with one of the most storied franchises in this league in the Boston Red Sox, but then really couldn't get out of his own way in how it ended, with the with the team. So if I was gonna give an honest prediction, it's going to be a mixture of cheering and boos, depending on the at bat. I wouldn't be surprised if they give him the respect in the first at bat of the ovation as the official welcome back, and then maybe things change. From that point forward, with um, we saw a great ovation for Xander Bogaerts in his return with San Diego. I think it's going to sound a little bit different with Devers, but I think that there's definitely still a section of Red Sox fans, including myself, that truly do appreciate the 2018 World Series run.
See, I'm a little bit of a booer. Uh, okay, I'm a mix of both. I will give him that first at bat respect, but I don't like the entitlement. I really don't. Like he just seems to, from a public relations standpoint, Joey, it just doesn't look good. But one thing that I think is really cool that I can say I was there for, I was there when Jacoby Ellsbury pinch ran in his first game back, or one of his first games back in Boston. Um, it was one of his first, not the first, but he pinch ran in 2014, and I was in or not 2014. It was a while later. It was like 17 or 8. Yeah, it was like 17 or 16. One of those years. It was the first Chris Sale year. I remember that. It was Sale versus Sevy, and Jacoby pinch ran, and you could hear boos all echoing throughout the ballpark. And there was just quite a bit of action going on. It was Red Sox Yankees. The animosity was there. The rivalry wasn't between the players; it was between the fan bases, Boston and New York fan bases. But it reminds me of that a little bit. But it won't quite be that way because you're not playing against the New York Yankees. You're not playing against like if he was on the Yankees, it'd be different. He's on the Giants. It's kind of chill. So I don't think it'll be boos echoing. I think it'll be a mixture as well, Joey.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he were to end up with some of the other teams, then we would have a similar conversation. What we're having with Jaylen Brown and going to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, that's gonna be where there's a lot of boos.
I'm glad that we. I'm glad that the Red Sox ownership, if they were going to trade him, had the decency to ship him out west and not have a Red Sox Yankees situation. Although there have been plenty of players that have played for both the Red Sox and the Yankees, but
David Wells,
having
Johnny
having
Damon.
someone the caliber of Rafael Devers, who in his career with the Red Sox was a certified Yankee killer, especially Garrett Cole. If you were to end up there, that would have created way more storylines than it already did. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in this upcoming series between the Red Sox and the San Francisco Giants. Kyler, I'll let you lead us into our next segment, which was a story that you wanted to cover with the recent LA Times article surrounding Los Angeles Dodgers, um, surrounding the Los Angeles Dodgers and their owner, Mark Walter.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of the most significant storyline in the dead of summer, if you will, or the end of it, where it's kind of a quiet time in sports. Um, I wanted to cover this because basically what he did was he basically took insurance contracts and kind of redistributed them, or probably took a little too much money from them and re-put them into his businesses, which included the Lakers and the Dodgers, which came out during the sale, in which he was a part of that ownership group the buses, with the Bus family. And I think why this story is super important is while we don't have like every single detail and there's a huge investigation going on, this is illegal. You can't. It's kind of like, embezzling, man. Like it's embezzling, it's fraud, it's all these different charges. I could go into criminal law, but we're not going to go into criminal law mode. Uh, Point is, it's illegal, but they use this money to finance a lot of the contracts because they were able to take or allegedly take. Let's say allegedly because he's not found guilty of anything and they're still investigating it. But I think with him being at the center of this investigation, how are you going to be able to kind of pay out your contracts? And this may force him to sell the team. But how are they going to be able to pay that? And is the union going to step in? How does the CBA in 2027 change because of this? And it was already a storyline because of the millions of dollars that they pay their players. But it's so much more significant knowing that a lot of that money that they're taking is unknowingly being maybe illegally acquired, Joey. And how did we not know about this sooner? I want to know more about it. And, I watched a video on it with Jeff Passan explaining the parts that were really illegal, which is taking more than you're reporting. They weren't reporting all of it, they were reporting some of it. And that was the part that was illegal. Um, Reportedly. I'm saying reportedly, allegedly. It's not found in a court of law yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But okay, if Passan knows so much about this, and if the league knows about this, like, how come we haven't learned about this sooner? This raises corruption concerns to me. It raises, are you going to be able to fulfill your contract obligations? What's going to happen in this CBA negotiation that was already tense because you got Scooble for nothing? Did you pay off the Tigers organization for that? No, that's my own. That's my own theory on that one. Don't take me for word on that. But that was a joke. But the situation, they already sold. He already sold his shares of the Lakers, and I'm wondering what that would be like under new ownership with the Dodgers. So
Yeah, I mean that Lakers sale itself, you can see it in the first. I'll read the first couple bullet points of the article here, just to get to put it into perspective for the listening audience. Dodgers owner Mark Walter faces a sweeping federal investigation into billions in undisclosed insurance loans, even as he unloads marquee assets, including a stunning $12.5 billion sale of the Lakers. So there's a ton of money already on the table there. And then you've got the most lucrative franchise in the Los Angeles Dodgers, which is where this next piece comes from. Quote, team executives insist the Dodgers are not for sale, but sports finance experts say Walter's urgent need for cash could eventually put baseball's most lucrative franchise in play. And now, from a baseball perspective, Kyler, I'll bring in a couple of things here if I can. Um,
absolutely.
one of the biggest pieces of talking points with how the Dodgers are being run recently is deferrals in contracts. Obviously, they gave Shohei Ohtani a $700 million contract, the largest contract in the history of not only Major League Baseball, but I believe in the history of professional sports at this time. And he right now is really only making $10 million a year throughout most of these playing days with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the rest of that will go into his retirement, which is made famous by guys like Bobby Bonilla and Manny Ramirez. But this is truly one of, if not the best players in Major League Baseball, who's um, going to be consistently at the end of the MVP conversation year in and year out as he remains in Major League Baseball. And then if it got to a point where eventually the team needed to be sold by Walter, how in the world is anybody else gonna have enough money to not only supply these contracts but keep the roster the way that it is?
Yeah,
Because the way that it's being put together now allows them to be the most aggressive team at the trade deadline, the most aggressive team in free agency, because not only do they have the best major league roster, they also have a top rated farm system. And that allowed them to get Tarek Skubal, no matter if it seemed like they didn't pay enough, they still paid enough in the eyes of the Detroit Tigers to get the deal done. So they have plenty of farm assets to go along with their World Series contending major league roster as well.
yeah. My take on that, Joey, is it all depends on what happens in this bargaining agreement, or the collective bargaining agreement, or the CBA, as I've been referencing. Just so that you guys know, is the Players Association versus the owners. And what do the owners do about this? This gives the league a bad rap, like it really does. Like that doesn't look good when it says, "Oh, by the way, the all the federal bureaus are looking into how this guy isn't reporting his money that he's making off of these insurance assets that he has, or whatever you want to call it." Um, and I worry about kind of like, does this ruin the game of baseball? It kind of does to me. Like, you have to do something about this. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is something put in the bargaining agreement about it, because it is significant. This is definitely one of the biggest scandals I've seen in a while. I mean, I've seen some scandals, but Deflategate is not nearly the same as Collection Gate. I'll call it Collection Gate, or Stacking Assets Gate, or Not Reporting It Gate. I don't know what we call it, Joey, but it's certainly Bad Business Gate, or in the red gate. But certainly, by having these assets frozen, he's not going to have the money to keep the team running functionally. So maybe beverage and food costs go up a bit at the stadium. Maybe I'll stick to Fenway. It's probably a little cheaper. At least John Henry will make a profit off of us. But I don't know. It's like, the reason why I brought it up is because I just heard about it today, and I'm like, this is something we have to talk about, because this may determine what happens in the future of baseball. So, and I'm also interested in what really happened. Why did it happen the way it happened? And I think the reason why it came out is because of that sale, because you have to disclose all your finances in those types of sales. Like, I'm talking about the Lakers sale. So when the Bus family decided to sell, you know, even their co-owners, or people that have a stake in it, have to disclose their finances. And somehow it got leaked. Now what do they do going forward? I don't know. But like you said, Joey, they've also had the deferral issue, which is why I don't think they need a salary cap. I think they need a salary floor, even more than a cap, because you have so many organizations that don't spend. But then you have a situation like this where it's like, how can you spend, $12 billion, in insurance assets that you don't report? Like, you can't compete with that. Nobody has $12 billion sitting around at home. Uh, so
Nope.
I, I just don't know what you do about that, and how you fulfill Otani's deferral, when it comes Shohei Otani Vanilla Day, 20 years down the line when we're gray and old. But I just don't know how you're going to fulfill that, and how the franchise can be run successfully now that it's in the red. And there are a lot of people suggesting that he's going to have to sell the team to get that cash flow. And I don't know who's going to be able to buy it or want
Yeah,
that PR nightmare. It's a PR nightmare.
that's very true. But I think it all starts with the CBA because the Dodgers are going to be the biggest talk of this upcoming collective bargaining agreement because fellow fans and fellow owners are probably sick of the Dodgers constantly being in the World Series talk. They've won back to back, are probably in a decent spot to um, win three in a row. They had the luxury of being able to pay Kyle Tucker $60 million for him not really being able to give them much of anything, but that's just how they've been able to do things these past couple of seasons. And one of the biggest pieces of discussion that came along with the Tarek Skubal trade is that the rest of the MLB owners kind of let it happen so they could use it as leverage to bash the Dodgers even further when they came to the table beginning the talks in the CBA at the end of this season. And the salary cap slash floor is going to be the second biggest thing that goes 1A, 1B in my eyes, really, alongside the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I'm not sure how they are going to come to any sort of agreement, which is why I don't really have any idea what the MLB calendar is going to look like in 2027.
I think we got to go to a game before this year's over. I really do. I don't think we're going to see baseball for another year, Joey. I'm like a little disappointed, but yeah, I don't see where there's a future where you get this done right away because action item number one is the Dodgers, and action item number two is cap slash floor situation. But the first is the Dodgers, and it's going to continue to be that. And I don't even think the players want this type of publicity either, Joey, when it comes to the investigation part of it. I think Otani might have to go back to allegedly not gambling, right? But you know, he might need to gamble for his money. I don't know. But I don't know. It's like it's kind of one of those things where I look at this and the owners aren't going to be very happy about it because it gives the owners a bad rap. So I don't know. I don't know what you do about the Dodgers at this point. I'm kind of shocked, to be honest. Well, I'm also not because you knew that the money had to come in from somewhere. Exactly where it comes from, Lord knows.
We'll have
Uh,
to figure.
but it's hard, you know, it's tough. But we'll see where it ends, and I certainly think that the CBA agreement thing, we're going to be talking about that all winter, Joey. We're going to be talking about it all winter, all spring. We're going to be talking about how there's no baseball. I'm calling it right now. Like we're going to be talking about it, and we're going to be talking about the Dodgers. This is why I'm prefacing this in August, right before we go back to school. And hey,
Yep.
still talking about the Dodgers in February. So, you know, it's just that. But the reason, like I said, the reason why I brought it up is because it's going to be such an important storyline to the development of baseball, professional baseball down the pipeline. Um, yeah, so I just think we got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it'll be plenty part of the discussion in some of my sports management classes coming up in this next year. But let's move on to the NFL very quickly. A couple of updates. We talked about it heading into the week this week that the um, Patriots and Eagles had a couple joint practices this week heading into their preseason week 2 matchup coming up tomorrow as we're recording this, but it'll be the night of when this episode comes out on Boston Sports Zone, which you'll find on YouTube. And one of the big storylines was AJ Brown and how the Eagles would play him not only in these joint practices, but if he's going to get some limited reps in the preseason, I'm sure we'll have to wait and really find out up until game time and how that's going to work. Obviously, we saw no Drake May, no AJ Brown in week one, and I would be shocked if it's more than maybe one or two drives in week two as well. I think you want to do as much as you can to limit the possibility of injuries, knowing how big both Drake May and AJ Brown are going to be to the success of your team this season. But I think that the receivers stood out from what I read this week in the joint practices. It was great to get all it was great to hear everything that our colleagues from Boston Sports Zone had to say about the joint practices. There was obviously the first annual joint pod between Foxborough Fellas, the LFG Pats pod, and a number of other Patriot social media outlets, which were all in attendance for day two of joint practice between the Patriots and Eagles, and the in this stretch, especially on day one as well, it seemed that Drake May had finally begun to find his groove, and the offense outdid the Eagles, highlighted a lot by day one as well, which bodes well for how I feel about what is going to lead to success for this year, because the Patriots finally have their number one receiver, which I think is going to not only be great in terms of the passing game, but I think it's going to open up the offense as a whole for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I heard AJ Brown has been a standout against his former team. I think he has a little feel in the tank for that team, a little bit there. And I think he also wants to get that rapport going with Drake May. It's preseason week 2. Couple weeks they're going to be playing the Seahawks in week 1, right, in Seattle, which nobody wants to play there. Even I'm like, I'll take a pass on that. Nobody likes playing in Seattle unless you're playing for Seattle. So, I think you have to get that going. But I heard that AJ Brown and Romeo Dobbs really kind of found their stride in the joint practice against the Eagles. So we'll see how many reps they get. Like you said, Joey, they're trying to avoid injury, so they're probably not going to play really till the regular season. But I would expect a series or two, potentially with Drake May, AJ Brown, Romeo. Juliet won't be out there with him, but Romeo will be out there. Yeah,
Romeo being Romeo Dobbs, of course.
yeah.
For those who might not get the Shakespearean reference of one Tyler quote. Um,
Hey, I gotta make some reference. Taylor Swift
but
makes it too, but
I'm interested to see how Pop Douglas plays as well, if he gets any run this week. Um, Everything I read from Pete and all the fellas said that Pop excelled in one-on-one, so I'm excited to see how that works in a real game setting. He's always been a guy that at times was the odd man out, and it's even difficult now with the possibility of keeping 7 receivers, what that's going to look like. But Pop, when he's on, is definitely explosive. He's the guy who's probably got the most foot speed on out of these Patriots receivers. Obviously, Efton Chisholm was a Cinderella story a year ago because he reminded a lot of fans, I should say, of Julian Edelman and the type of grindy player that he is. But I think that Pop Douglas brings a sense of athleticism and speed to this Patriots receiver room that I don't think they're going to do away with.
yeah, I agree with you. I think that's gonna be tough for them. The Giants kind of had that same problem, but not as deep. They had like at one point they had like 12 receivers, and now they've gotten rid of Juju for Najee Harris, who was in the Steel City as well, and as a running back for them. But I listen. I feel like the Patriots receiver room, that's a good problem to have. Keeping 7 might be tough to do. I don't know who you get rid of in that room. I don't. I like, and I think Pop has a good rapport too with Drake. So that also adds to it. But it's a like I said, it's a good problem to have. And you have Mac too, right? I think Mac is great. Chisholm, in terms of guys who are grinders, and then you have Romeo Dobbs, who I just made a Shakespearean reference to, and yeah, I mean, you just have such a talented group this year that it's just like in your booty, and it's just like
Yeah.
these guys. The I would love a receiver room like this. It's unbelievable. They also just signed Greg Van Rotten, who played pretty rotten with the Giants. So I don't know. I mean, that's a little bit of a depth move for them, but
Yeah,
uh,
it is. Obviously they had Ben Brown and one other guy go down in terms of interior offensive line in preseason week one. So it's exactly what you said. It's a depth signing of a veteran guy that they are hoping can improve with the scheme of Doug Marone. Um, like you mentioned, Kyler, he was most recently with the Giants, and the Giants as a whole last year left a lot to be desired. So I'm hoping that with uh, a new scheme, maybe Greg can fit in nicely as a depth interior
yeah,
offensive line
I
piece.
like what John's doing already. I'll give you a little moment here. Like I said, he just signed Najee Harris. Uh, and so I like that move. Scat, Harris, and Tyrone Tracy. Although Tyrone Tracy is in a little bit of hot water right now because he missed a block for for Jackson Dart last week, and Dart almost ended up not throwing darts for the year because he just missed the block. So, and they did, like I said, they also have to work on their run D as well. But I like John Harbaugh in there. I do. I think it might take until week 3 or week 4 for it to click because you're not playing your starters right now. But you have Abdul Carter, Malachi is playing well. He was the Mount Fields, I believe. He's a guy there who they drafted as a receiver. He looked really good in the one drive with Jackson Dart. He had the touchdown. And Jackson Dart, I actually saw another thing on Facebook today where a reel where Jackson Dart was talking about how he wasn't surprised how good the guy is because he really prepares and his football IQ is amazing. So that's a guy to watch for the New York Giants. I know I'm going to get booed for doing that. Sorry, folks. I'm getting my thoughts out on the Giants, but I really like both these teams. I don't hold it against anybody. I grew up in Vermont, so I grew up with a few screws loose. But I can like both teams. But I think both teams look good going into it, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both made the playoffs. Now that's a lot of pressure on two teams that have different schemes, um, but the Patriots made the Super Bowl last year. Now I will preface this by saying it takes a little bit for teams that have new schemes to pick up. So like that run defense thing, I know Harbaugh will fix it, but it's like variable, when you're losing to Aaron Rodgers, discount double check Steelers, and you're losing to the Raiders who had Geno at quarterback. But it'll be interesting this year to see how they play against those teams, especially with Mendoza as the quarterback in Vegas, and he seems to be standing out well. And Mike McCarthy reuniting with Aaron. So I'm interested to watch that storyline.
Yeah, there's plenty of storylines to go around all in the NFL, and it'll be sure to be a good year, not only for the Patriots, but there's plenty of teams who are looking to improve all around. We'll finish off today's episode with a couple of veteran NBA signings in DeMar DeRozan signing with the Denver Nuggets for $3.9 million. And after a uh, buyout goes through with the Dallas Mavericks, Klay Thompson is set to join Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Miami Heat down in South Beach. Kyler, this will be a pretty quick segment, but it is a couple of veteran signings for teams that are looking to ensure their depth. Um, to me, it looks like Denver wants to compete again in the West. That we've talked about it in a lot of our offseason NBA segments, that it's going to be tough to match up with either the Spurs or the Thunder at the top of the Western Conference. But in a couple of in our discussions with teams in an outside shot, Denver did come up. So getting a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who's been in the league a while and can still fill up the basket when you need it, is a great depth signing for Denver in the way that I see it. And it didn't cost them much at the 3.9 million mark either.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Mike Conley signing in a lot of ways, where you're getting a veteran guy who's been around a while. But I like DeMar DeRozan's shooting better, obviously. I still think he could probably put up a good game every once in a while. Just because, he isn't what he used to be doesn't mean he can't still do something for you. He can still shoot. He can fill veteran minutes. He brings a veteran presence. They just traded Peyton Watson, I believe, and filled that spot with DeMar DeRozan. They want a veteran presence. They want to compete. You have San Antonio and Oklahoma, those two teams who are just so dominant. You want to bring in a veteran guy who knows what's going on there. And, you have the Joker, but what else do you really have other than him and Murray? So they're kind of figuring out what's going to work best for them moving forward. And also, they got to start figuring out long term what do they want to do, because I think they might have 1 or 2 more years in that window, but then eventually the Joker's going to hit free agency. So I'm wondering, what are they thinking long term? What are they thinking short term? All of that stuff, and then the Clay rumor. I'll just address it right here. I like that for the Heat. They don't have any good shooters. And I know Clay is not Splash Brothers Clay, but give me Clay Thompson shooting the basketball. Still, I still would. Especially on a team that has no guards and uh, and has decided to invest in Bam in the grapefruit. So it's like, okay, you got two bigs, but who's gonna play guard? And I don't know. I mean, Clay's not going to be a ball handler all the time, but you're going to need a little bit of help there. And I'm certainly, I just, okay, I'm just a little puzzled in that department still with Pat. But yeah, but the shooting, he definitely brings the shooting and the
Yeah,
experience.
I'll pick it up here. I think what you're getting at is that if you're gonna build a team around Giannis, you need shooting. Because Giannis is gonna drive the ball way more than he's gonna shoot the ball, and if they're gonna shut him down in the paint, he's gotta get someone, kick it out to someone along that 3 point line. And now Klay Thompson is going to um be one of those guys. Obviously, the biggest question for me is what kind of minutes is he going to play? He doesn't really strike me as a starter anymore, but with the lack of depth around Giannis, maybe he does get some starting minutes. Obviously, he had a very serious Achilles injury a couple years back, which is unfortunately a very common injury these days in the NBA. But he's been back since then. But it's clear to a lot of us now that probably all NBA fans know now that Klay Thompson's in the back half of his career. So anything he can give Miami, in terms of scoring is going to help them out. And I think both looking at it from a Denver perspective with DeRozan and Thompson with Miami, they're veteran signings for teams that are looking to compete. and win a championship. So any more veteran presence that you can add is going to be a roster improvement any day of the week. All right. Well, that was a lot that we were able to cover in this episode of the Titletown Rundown. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode and enjoy some Red Sox along with some NFL preseason action going on this weekend. That's going to do it for this episode of the Titletown Rundown here on Boston Sports Zone. Once again, you can follow our X account at Titletown Pod, and then our Instagram and TikTok at Titletown.rundown, and keep up with all the Boston sports action here on Boston Sports Zone YouTube at sportszone_BOS on YouTube. That's going to do it once again. Thank you all for watching and have a great rest of your weekend.